Committee, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you all today. Chase Bearden with the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. We are currently against the bill as it's written. I'm hoping that we can get farther along and get to the point where we feel like this will benefit the disability community. With that said, I know Senator Hughes, when you had your opening, you were talking about this bill is to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. If that's the case, some of the issues within the bill would need to be corrected for the disability community. I'm going to jump, since Jeff already covered a lot of areas, I'm going to jump back to the curing process. So as we all know, in mail-in ballots, the signature verification, there can tend to be issues with signatures. I lost the use of my hands. Others who may be on medications, could be a stroke. These things change rapidly at times. For us, what we'd like to see, and we appreciate that there is some cure language in this bill, but it's missing some major pieces in it that'll make it work. The first thing we really need to see is if you're going to move forward with adding the voter ID license number in there, is that should also be eligible for a cure. Because when people are writing that down, they can easily transpose one wrong number as they're writing it. It could be that the election official that's looking at it thinks your 4 is a 9. So if there's any issue with that, instead of the whole ballot being thrown out, that should also be included in the cure process. We strongly suggest that y'all look at how the current cure process is put in place, because for some people, it just won't work. As Jeff said, if you're filing under disability, odds are it's probably partly that you can't get down to the actual polling site. Well, under the current cure process in this bill, you would actually have to go down to the elections office to actually be able to do your to cure your ballot. What needs to happen is we need to have a remote cure put in there, similar to what many other states have done. And I'd strongly suggest, Senator Hughes, the work you did with Representative Busey on the bill or the mail-in ballot tracking software, as they're developing it in the Secretary of State's office. Since that is already a secure portal, you're logging in to check and see if there are any issues with your mail-in ballot. That would be the ideal place for you to then be able to cure it instead of having to go down to the elections office to do that. That would also then benefit our people who are overseas and the military who wouldn't be able to come down to an election office to actually cure their ballot. So having that remote cure in there is vital. Making sure a driver's license number or can be corrected, since we don't even know the layout of the envelopes if it might get missed. With that portion, moving on, there's one issue. I know, Senator Hughes, we've talked about this a lot.
Chase, if you would, please bring your thoughts to a close, because we're up against the clock, and I got 4 more folks that I need to to get through that have special needs just like you. So
I understand.
Yes, sir.
So going to the last page of the handout we gave you, allowing people who are visually impaired to actually have an accessible mail-in ballot. This is being done in other states. The problem with it, we talk about having people assist you. The most secure ballot is the one you cast yourself and the one you sign yourself, the envelope. To get to that point, we actually have to have accessible mail-in ballots. It was also a recommendation by the Governor's Committee with Disabilities. On the last page, we added in Florida's language on how they passed it to make sure that blind voters and those who need to be able to use technology for an accessible ballot can. Have some other recommendations in other areas I'd be more than happy to share. But just to say this, the disability community, today is August 9th. For me, this is my 28th anniversary of when I broke my neck, about the time my parents were getting the diagnosis. You never know when you're going to need to use a lot of these accommodations. Yeah. So I ask that y'all strongly consider them, because if we're going to secure the ballot, it's making it so people can do it themselves.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bearden. Members, questions for Mr. Bearden?
I have some.
Senator Zaffrini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bearden, again for your excellent testimony as usual. I'm looking on page 3 of your written testimony, and specifically the solution that you propose regarding changes that will benefit visually impaired voters. And you have that solution. You say that states should deploy accessible, compliant absentee vote by mail solutions. Do you have some specific recommendations that we could use for this particular bill?
Yes, ma'am. There's already groups out there that, basically your UOCAVA system, the system that you're using for your overseas and your military, can be made to supply an accessible ballot. Basically, the person would then fill out their application form and request that they were going to need that. They would then be able to use their computer at home and the actual technology that's on it, VoiceOver, that reads it to them so that they can fill it out. Now, before anybody says anything and freaks out, this would not be sent back over the internet. It would be printed and actually put in the envelope supplied by the Secretary of State's office and sent back. That way, they're the ones who are controlling it from start to finish. And it is probably one of the best ways. I know there's already one of the vendors that runs our current UOCAVA program for some of the counties actually offers it too, and I'm sure there are many others.
Thank you so much. Also on page 3, and you referenced in your oral testimony, the Florida legislation, and you provide for us a paragraph from 101.662. Is it your recommendation that we adopt that language in this bill?
I am more than happy to supply you with even more language if you'd like. I just wanted to put that out there because it is probably one of the most simple, and it was also probably the least prescriptive to allow the Secretary of State's office to work directly with the disability community to make sure that we can design something that works for everyone and keeps our ballots and our system secure.
Thank you. Do you have any other suggestions for amending this legislation?
I do have one more suggestion. It's something you brought up earlier, and that is when it comes to the wet signature on a application, voter application. For many of us, we will use the computer to actually fill out the application as you're going. In the disability community right now, there are many who use a signature stamp. We would ask that that be included. I know I've gone back and forth with the Secretary of State's office. There is no law against it, but there are current rules. They do not allow people to use a signature stamp. I can tell you these are kept on their bodies and they are kept private and secure. And the reason why we should allow it is exactly what I believe it was Ms. Vera at the very beginning talked about. Under the current way we do witnessing for an application on disability, is if that person witnesses it, it bypasses the signature verification completely. I would strongly suggest using that person's signature stamp so that that is what's marked on the application, so that when they get their envelope and they need to send it back, they're then also putting their ID number, if that's what y'all decide to do, and the stamp that they use. It is important that we don't rely heavily and always on trying to have a witness or someone else do this for you when we have the ability to make accommodations and make this work so that others can vote on their own and have that secure and independent ballot.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions regarding how we should amend the language referencing curbside voting for persons with disabilities?
I'll be honest, I think curbside voting has been working fine. One suggestion I would say, I know that there's a wish to have everyone get out of the vehicle. That's not always the easiest thing because you may have brought your two 95-year-old grandparents with you who have a difficulty making one get out and stand out while the other one's going during bad weather. It's not really sensible. But what I would say for those of you who have never seen curbside voting or used it is that when I used it the last time after I broke my leg and getting in and out of the vehicle was just virtually impossible, is that they brought out the machine and you have the election official standing 4 feet away from you. If someone's trying to intimidate you, your window's down, they're going to understand and they're going to hear that. So I would want to say that, right now I think the curbside voting is working. Besides needing to ensure that there are signs that people can call and make sure they get their ballot brought out to them. But other than that, I think
Okay. And I
leaving
think-
it where it's at would be better.
And that language has been amended, Senator Hughes, correct? So people no longer have to leave the car?
It's been that way since the first special session.
So
That's
we have
correct.
changed that.
So it has been made so they don't have to get out.
It's been out a couple of iterations
Okay.
now.
In response to your feedback, by the way.
Thank you.
You gave some very clear feedback.
Getting
about that. That was
confusing.
very
There's a lot of
helpful.
them out there.
Let me be precise. That was a floor amendment, Senator Safrani, during the special session that removed that language. So the bill that the Senate passed did not contain that requirement. The intent was obviously to preserve the secret ballot for that person, but understanding balancing the interest and not making folks get out of the car, that was removed on the floor of the Senate in the special session.
And in response to their feedback about it.
Oh, of course.
Yes, so that was very good. So you know that we're listening.
Yes, and one thing I'll end with, Senator Hughes, earlier you mentioned the young woman who had to go through her testimony and give those comments about, not knowing how to use the system. I think we're having to take a reactive position right now, and that's why y'all are doing some of this, when you should be actually looking at more proactive and how to stop that. And the problem is that there is a lack of understanding and education given on how to use the machines and how to go through it so that you don't need assistance. We used to use HAVA funds to actually educate people on how to use machines. I think that's something y'all may want to address or may want to set money aside, especially as we have newer machines coming out, is educating people and finding ways to have the machine companies provide videos that could be put on the Secretary of State's website, and y'all push that so that when someone comes in there, they don't have to worry about that person helping them show them how to use the machine.
Excellent.
And that eliminates the problem with people needing more assistance.
It's such a simple solution that it's excellent. That's something we should follow up on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bearden. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.